With us today, we have Dr. Tom Stafford, who's going to talk with us about the illusory truth or illusion of truth effect, its influence on belief, and its limitations. Dr. Stafford is a cognitive scientist at the University of Sheffield, UK, with a focus on learning, bias, and decision-making, and what he calls evidence-informed persuasion. Dr. Tom Stafford, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, great to be here.
Now, in your BBC article, How Liars Create the Illusion of Truth, you say that, quote, the illusion of truth can be a dangerous weapon in the hands of a propagandist. Can you please explain how the effect works and how it can be dangerous?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, there's a lot of history around this. The illusory truth effect is a phenomenon whereby you repeat something and it then appears more true to people. And so we all probably have some intuitive idea about this, and this is kind of a principle of propaganda, that if you want people to believe things, you repeat the lie often enough and it becomes the truth. But for the experimental psychologist, we're interested in capturing those things in the lab so we can understand if they're true, and when they are true, why they're true. And so the original effect was done by a psychologist, I think, called Lynn Hasher in the 70s, and she got true statements and false statements and asked people to rate their truth either once or multiple times, and found that the statements that people rated multiple times were perceived to be more true by the end, even if they were false. So I've got here some example statements. So from that experiment, French horn players get cash bonuses to stay in the US Army. True, at least in 1977. Zachary Taylor was the first president to die in office. False. So these are statements which were designed for people not to have an idea about, or not to be certain about. And the basic effect, which has been found many times, is that asking people to rate them multiple times, so the repetition is created by the multiple ratings, increase the perception of their truthiness.
How was the repetition provided to these people that rated it higher?
So you can do iterations of these experiments where you get people to watch something or read a text, and that rather than doing a rating task, they're kind of exposed incidentally to the statements, and you get the same phenomena. So there's a related phenomena in psychology called the mere exposure effect, which is that people like things that they've seen more. So you can do these kind of experiments where you show people lots of images, or you play certain sounds again and again, and the ones that you repeat, people rate as more preferable by the end of the experiment. They like them more.
So you just mentioned the mere exposure effect. Can you talk to us at all about the relationship between familiarity and what we perceive as truth?
So what we're doing when we try and judge the truth of something is we assemble all the evidence, and the lesson we learn from thousands of psychology experiments is that we're good reasoners, but imperfect reasoners. No one has access to an encyclopedia in their mind. We can't constantly be checking the internet. Even the evidence of our own senses is sometimes misleading, so we have to construct an answer based on strategies, which are sometimes by psychologists called heuristics, which are rules for judgment that give us a good enough answer most of the time. And it seems that psychologically, one of the heuristics we use to inform our judgments is a sense of familiarity, or an ease of processing, which is called fluency. And that informs our judgment of things. So if you're asked to judge the truth of something like, is Helsinki the capital of Finland? Maybe you've been to Finland and you can call up an actual memory. Maybe you paid particular attention in school and you remember your geography classes. But if you don't have access to something concrete, then you probably, base it on, does it sound right? How do you feel? And that's where this feeling of familiarity or fluency can creep into your judgment. And one of the things that affects familiarity is repetition. And so the repetition of an untrue thing can influence people's truth judgments. But the key to understanding that really is that this isn't an insane strategy for someone to use. That in a world where true things are repeated more often than false things, so dogs are pets, planes fly, these things are repeated more often than their opposites. Familiarity will, more often than not, be for things that are true. So using that strategy is not foolproof, but it's not madness either.
That's a great distinction to draw, that just because something is repeated a lot doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. It's not a crazy strategy. It's actually a survival mechanism, because we can't be constantly thinking about every single decision we make all day long.
Yeah. So the insight from psychology is that we're limited reasoners and we have to kind of deploy our resources. Our memories are fallible. Our senses are fallible. We don't have time to check everything. So we rely on strategies. So does it seem familiar? Does it seem plausible? Was it told to me by someone I trust? These are all strategies. Just believing, I hear it. If a newspaper, if it's in the newspaper and that newspaper has a good reputation, maybe I'll believe it. We all know that newspapers make errors, but I've got to choose who to believe and who not to believe. These are examples of strategies that are used to weigh up truth or falsehood.
Okay, thank you. At Propwatch, our mission is to increase media literacy and raise public awareness of propaganda and disinformation. And part of what you do in the latter part of your article is educate readers on how to combat the effects of the illusion of truth. What's the relationship between educating ourselves and being vulnerable to this particular propaganda technique, do you think?
I think the key here is to recognize that we're all imperfect reasoners. So when someone asks me what I believe or what I think is true, there are many things that I believe to be true, and I probably thought them through, or I had good reasons to come to those conclusions once, but it may be that now I've forgotten, why I believe them or who told me. And in a world where there's never enough time and information is uncertain, I can't spend all my time checking the facts. But when the issues are important, and I think when people disagree with you is a signal that the issue is important, you need to recognize that we're all vulnerable to errors of memory and reasoning, and we should check our references. That's why we try and provide arguments, why we back up our claims with sources, and recognizing your own kind of humility, your own ability to believe things. Why do I think that? How is it possible I made a mistake? It'd probably be the big lesson here for me.
Well, it looks like we're out of time for today. If you'd like to know more about Dr. Tom Stafford's work, you can find him on Twitter at Tom Stafford, all lowercase, and at tomstafford.staff.shef.ac.uk. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been fun.